if the Georgia Bulldogs don't get this done next year, there's no championship in 2024. And of course, this is something they probably needed a lot more of this past season. I'm talking about recovering fumbles. Georgia was pretty bad at that last year. They only recovered 3 fumbles all season. 2 of them came against Florida State when the season was already over. That is last in the SEC and second to last in the country, tied for 124th. The only team that recovered less fumbles this year on defense was Temple. They only recovered 2. Definitely something that Georgia has to improve on next year. Now, when you look across the board, Georgia's going to be very good next year. I think they're going to be a complete team. But when you don't win the national championship at a place like Georgia, you've got to do some nitpicking. You got to say, okay, what did we not do this year that we can improve upon? And there's not a whole lot that Georgia can improve upon. I mean, they were very good across the board last year, but they didn't do a great job of recovering fumbles. Now, of course, you've got to force them, right? Georgia forced 7 fumbles. Still not a great number, right? That's one thing that they have to do defensively next year. If they want to win the whole thing, they've got to force more fumbles and they've got to recover more fumbles. Now, in total, the defense was really good. They picked off a lot of passes, a lot of turnover on downs, right? So they did create a lot of pressure and a lot of turnovers against the offense. They were top 10 total defense this year. So I'm not here trying to crap on the defense. They were really good. The defensive line could improve. They got to the quarterback 30 times. You know, that's something I hear all the time. Georgia, they got to get to the quarterback more. They need more sacks. That's the reason they lost to Alabama. Well, they sacked Jalen Milroe 4 times, which was second most against any team all season long. The pressure's definitely been there, and that's a reason why they were first in the country on third down defense and 9th in the country in passing yards allowed. Both of those categories, they were first in the SEC. So they are getting pressure. And pressure is great, but you've got to get to the quarterback. And when you get to the quarterback, you got to get that ball loose. That ball's got to be on the ground, and then you got to jump on the ball, right? We've seen Georgia do that, plenty. I feel like in recent years. I don't have the numbers with me, but if there's one thing Georgia can improve defensively, it's knocking the ball out and getting on top of the football. Those are game changers. Not only are those drive killers, right, but those are big momentum swinging type of plays. And we saw it against the Gators. I think that was the first one through the first 13 games of the season where it was against the quarterback, right? I think it was Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins knocked it loose. Marvin Jones jumped on it, and you're like, finally, right? Finally, they knocked the ball out and they recovered it. And it was crazy that was the first one to happen all year in the Florida game. Then it didn't happen again until Florida State. Michael Williams had forced a fumble and fell on, if I remember correctly, and then Cole Spear on special teams fell on one that I think Cass Jones forced. But either way, that's got to improve. There's no doubt about it. But I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. Georgia was very good defensively. And again, they probably need more beef, more size in the middle. And they're going to have to get out after the quarterback more from the middle. I don't know who's going to step up. They might go out and get another guy from the transfer portal. Jordan Hall, Jamal Jarrett, or 2 freshmen from last season that are going to emerge. I think they're going to have a much bigger role next year. Michael Williams playing that jack linebacker position, I think is going to add more, pass rush off the edge. And he's a guy who can force a fumble. There's no doubt about that. Jalen Walker can force them too. So the guys are there. The talent is there. They just have to execute that a little bit more. And it's crazy because I know that Georgia practices this, right? Every week, probably every day in practice. They're working on jawing that ball loose, jumping on it, swarming to the football when it's on the ground. And the numbers say it just didn't happen a lot last year. The numbers say it and reality says it, right? That's one thing. If they don't improve on and they don't force a big fumble and jump on it in a big moment next year, whether it's on the road against Alabama, on the road against Ole Miss, on the road against Texas, right? Tennessee coming to town, Auburn, Florida. There's a lot of big games next year, and there's going to be several instances where they need a big turnover. They need a big momentum swinging type of play on defense. And interceptions are great, and they need to keep that up. I mean, you've got to have a solid, secondary. But at the end of the day, they work on forcing fumbles and jumping on them all the time. So it needs to translate more on the field. And again, let's go over the sacks. Because 30 sacks, 9th in the SEC, not great, could have been worse. But you would expect a place like Georgia, a program like Georgia, who, brings in 5-star pass rushers every single year, would get to the quarterback more. Now, again, a lot of pressures. I mean, they lived in the backfield, they forced pressure, and that's why you get, an elite number on third down defense and passing yards allowed, because they're getting after the quarterback. They had 1 sack against Florida State, 4 against Alabama. Probably should have been more, right? I mean, Michigan sacked them, 100 times? It was ridiculous. That's how they beat Alabama. They were all over Jalen Milroe. He had nowhere to go. He could not escape. He escaped a little too much against Georgia. Michigan wasn't allowing that. Georgia got into him 4 times, needed to be more, but 4 is 4. They sacked Georgia Tech, Haynes King twice, 1 sack against Tennessee, 2 sacks against Ole Miss, 3 against Missouri, 5 against Florida, 1 against Vanderbilt, 3 against Kentucky, 3 against Auburn. So I think those numbers may surprise some people. I don't know if it felt like they got to the quarterback 30 times all season. And the cupcake games, they don't matter. I did not even look up the numbers for UAB and the school, the blind, whoever they played in the beginning, like Tennessee Tech, Tennessee State. I forgot. It doesn't matter, right? What matters is you forcing these turnovers on the biggest stage against Alabama with the season on the line, right? And they're going to have to do it next year too, especially on the road. When things get tough, you need a game changer on defense to come and make a big hit on the quarterback, force a fumble, put the offense in a good position, right? It switches the field, but it swings momentum as well. And if we're doing the nitpicking thing, right? I cover a program that just won 2 back-to-back titles. So when they don't win a title, and the fans, of course, watching this are the same thing. You're probably thinking, where can they improve? They didn't get the job done this year. How can they get better? Well, one category is, forcing more fumbles and falling on them. Again, when you're second to last in the country at a particular, statistic or category, that's something that's got to be circled. That's got to be highlighted. They got to do whatever it takes to force more fumbles and get on them. Recovering 3 fumbles is just not going to cut it. Excuse me. Could you imagine what a big, hit on Jalen Milroe in the fourth quarter would have done? Springing the ball loose and jumping on him. I mean, all they really needed, one, I say 1, maybe it's 2, but they needed a big 4th down turnover to really swing that game. And it happened with Michigan. I think it was early in the fourth quarter, Jalen Milroe is trying to run, pick up something, try to be Superman, and they knocked the ball out and they recovered. I don't remember if Michigan scored immediately, but they stopped the drive and they eventually came back to tie it and won the game. Fuzzy memory of that night watching those games. I was out with some friends, so I don't remember all the details, right? I don't want to dive into that more, but I may have got that wrong. Maybe I got it right. At the end of the day, Georgia could have used a big-time fumble and a recovery against Alabama to win that game, and they're going to need that against some of these big programs, especially on the road. You want to silence a crowd? You knock that quarterback down, force a fumble, and jump on it. Place is going to be silent. And I think Georgia's got to do a better job of that next year. But again, the interceptions, those will come into play, and those happen with pressure too. So Georgia had a top 10 defense, 9th in total defense, 1st in the SEC, giving up under 280 yards a game. That's great. They're 5th in scoring defense, 1st in the SEC, giving up only 15.6 points per game. So again, I don't know if it's nitpicking or not, because they were towards the bottom in the country. So it is something glaring that has to change. But if they don't get better at that and force more fumbles and jump on them, I'm not sure they're going to win the whole thing next year. You have to have a complete team if you want to win a national championship. Maybe not this year, because Washington is beatable and Michigan is beatable, and none of these teams are truly elite. They're very good. And who knows? These might be the best 2 teams in college football playing for it all on Monday night. I still think Georgia on their best day is certainly better than both of those teams. But at the end of the day, you got to get the job done. You got to go out there and you have to force the fumbles. You got to jump on them. You have to make the plays. Georgia is as talented as any team in the country, but you got to execute and you got to force turnovers, especially in the fourth quarter. Georgia could have used that against Alabama for sure, but they didn't get it done. Maybe next year is the year where they can force more fumbles and make some of these big-time, game-changing plays defensively on the road and against some of their biggest rivals. We'll see if it happens. If it does, you got to like Georgia's chances of putting themselves in a position to win another national championship. That's what I think. What do you think? Drop a comment in the section below. Make sure to sign up to our free newsletter. That link is down below. You can read, all the free stories we have over on Dawg Post. But if there's something else that comes to your mind about what Georgia needs to do to improve, how do they get better offensively, defensively, special teams, drop a comment in the section below. We love looking at that. Thanks for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you over on Dawg Post.